Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We were going to do, well, we've got an infinite amount of topics to discuss in future streams, but having been persuaded by my colleagues in Lornography, we kind
Sorry,
of
give me a sec. Oh.
we decided to do a stream about what Lorne is up to at this moment in time because
Where the hell is this coming from?
we
There we go.
believe we don't know where he is basically. So there was a problem with the website was supposed to have been updated with Lorne's address when he was released, and there's a problem where it's not a problem, but we don't know what his address is. So there's all kinds of crazy theories going on at the minute. Someone in the community, this is unconfirmed information that his family. I've tried to get him. Well, we'll talk a bit more about that now. But I'm joined as usual by Shins Koala and Tiffany. Guys, thanks for joining me.
Hello.
Hey, all.
Everything all right, Shin? There's been the usual amount of disruption within the first few minutes.
Yeah, I had things going on my computer. I couldn't shut down, but I just did. So we're good.
Everything okay?
Mm-hmm. All good.
Right, good stuff. Right, so you've kind of been keeping on top of this a bit more than I have, to be honest. So just to clarify, it's concerning. We've confirmed that he's out of prison, yeah. But just like only a minute ago, you said that it's showing that he's still in prison.
No. Prison's different from jail. Just so you know, when I mean he's out of federal custody. He's out of Fort Dix. The BOP says he was released on 2/5. And then from there, we just go to the registries. And Tiffany and I both looked at the national and the Maine registry. And they're a little bit different, but they pretty much say the same thing.
Right. So
I can't even say that name.
The situation is, as I understand it, that the RSO website is supposed to update immediately with his current whereabouts, which is obvious why. And, this thing is, the RSO website thing has been going on for many years, and it's a massive part of crime prevention, and it's took very seriously. His address hasn't been updated. So what does it show at the minute when you go on there?
Just Foxtrot, Maine, essentially. I got to go. Let me look at it real quick. It's right here. It says just Dover, Foxtrot, Maine. That's all it says. Just the name of the town. And I think Foxtrot might be the name of a facility. Who knows? I think actually the jail is Pisquatty, whatever it is. But the National Register has the specific jail's name. So, where that takes us, I don't know. But there's a lot of more, there's more evidence that we can look at and make about 5 or 6 guesses on this thing.
One is, can I just point out the most obvious thing, which is there is some kind of error in the system. So there's an error on the website, there's an error getting the information to them, it's some kind of an administration error, human error. That's a possibility. That's number one. I would suggest that that's probably not likely with things like the RSO. I don't think they're going to be fucking about with stuff like that. But we have to just clarify what we're talking about here is pure speculation. No one has got a fucking clue, right? As I understand it, he's not been in contact with the usual people. We don't know. Tiffany's not had any messages. The usual people are in contact with him. There's been no contact from him, so nobody knows exactly what's going on. What we're trying to do, I mean, really, it's kind of pointless speculating, really, but it is a bit of fun. And the way I look at it is, this is kind of a big chapter in the Lorne saga. And Connor has just put a brilliant comment in the chat and just said, "Why the fuck do I care?" And it's interesting. Why do we give a shit about this guy? Why do we care what he's up to? But for some reason, we all do. We've been following his story. We've got a bizarre fascination with him. And at the minute, he's been released from jail, after serving 6 months. The first time he's been back inside since his original sentence. And he's out now, and something potentially has happened. And it's a big point in the saga. You know, you're going to look at all the story, and you're going to, you know, if you was going to write a fucking some kind of a book about it, you know, this would be an important chapter. It's like there's many possibilities which we're going to go into now. Luckily for us, Shin has got a lot of experience with regard to the legal system in the US. So,
well, let me preface that real quick, Andrew. Typically, in my old practice, once the guys were either convicted or acquitted or whatever, I lose sight of them. I never really had to follow anything in the penal system. And the BOP, for instance, in this case, the Bureau of Prisons, don't take orders from judges unless the warden is brought in on a writ of mandamus and he's ordered to do something. So the judge can make a recommendation on a sentencing, and the BOP can say, to hell with it, we're going to put him where we want. So there's not much evidence there. But that brings us back to what potentially, is there any evidence on the federal docket on Pacer? And Tiffany's been on top of that. There's been one entry, and I think it was in the same numbered order, so there wasn't anything that was filed that could be under seal, I don't think. And that entry was just basically returning the evidence, which you pretty much see every time you wrap up a case. So when it comes down to what happens to my guys once they're in prison, I usually lose touch. So this is all in my blind spot, just so everybody knows. And I'm kind of fumbling around just like everybody else is. So I have no expertise in this area.
Oh, well, thanks for pointing that out. But you can, you know, from me talking to you, I can tell that you've still got a general knowledge of what would happen to offenders when they're released, and why the websites are updated, the difference between, you see, the thing is, what you got to, it's something that confuses me a lot, because you've got like federal prisons and state prisons and all that. Really confuses me, because it's very simple in the UK. We don't have any of that. We have prisons, and that's it. One type of prison.
Everything's
across
under the
UK.
crown.
You got an offender who, let's just say, someone commits a crime, they're kept on remand, and they're kept on remand at the same prison that they'll probably end up in anyway. So there's no differences. So when you guys are talking about this legal system and the differences in where people are being held, it's totally different, and so it's difficult for me to get my head around it, to be honest. So all of this is a little bit confusing, but it is interesting, because obviously we want to know, even though, like I've said many times, even though I've try and stick to and I think the prime directive where non-contact is important. Obviously, people have their different views. I will never deny that I'm ridiculously intrigued into what goes on in Lorne's life, because it's car crash TV, and I'm intrigued. And it's the same with you, Tiffany, isn't it? I mean, you said you're not interested in talking to him anymore at all, but you're still kind of interested in what's going on, aren't you?
Oh, absolutely. He's a fascinating person, in the most negative way possible. But I think it definitely is interesting. One of the concerns I think that everyone can agree on is that he would have walked out of prison this time and would have walked right back into his regular life, meaning the trailer was still going to be there. The dogs were still going to be there. He was going to look for another job, but he was still going to have his mom and Roy and Aunt Sharon and the usual suspects there, basically have handled everything for him, and he was going to carry on. So that was definitely one of the biggest concerns, because nobody's ever going to grow from that. He's never had the chance to hit his true rock bottom, in the sense that he has to put things together himself. He relies heavily on everyone else to do that for him. And he's never been in that position. Even when he was arrested in Kentucky and came back to Maine, he was taken care of.
Even when he was,
brilliant.
One of the phone calls he made from the jail, he had the impression that this is just a hiccup, and he'll be back to his normal life pretty soon.
So is it possible he's got a bit of shell shock then? Like, this really has hit him hard?
Well, yeah. I mean, if we go, Andy, I think one of the best ways to do this is to go over the facts that we do know.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
and then we could put together, some theories about this.
Okay. Do you want to
Somebody had asked.
start? What do we know so far
Well,
exactly?
well, let's just take, for instance, one thing that we do know. TCAP Recipes had asked, would he go in the custody of his mother? Um, and the answer to this, and I don't know why I didn't think of this much earlier, but there was never a chance he was allowed to go live with his mother. His mother's under Section 8. So Section 8 bans felons from living under the same roof. So I think
Just
that's
explain that a little bit more, Shim, because I know you've told me about this before. So
Section,
he's not.
Section 8 is for people who require public assistance on housing. And what they do is they find some place and the landlord, I'm not exactly sure how the landlord applies or whatever, but the landlord gets paid the subsidy from the government, and the person who is receiving the benefit pays the rest of the rent, which is usually pretty nominal, maybe a couple $100. But as part of that, it's very important. A lot of these Section 8s were within inner cities, so there was a lot of drug trafficking going on, and people were using these houses, as supply areas, or just doing transactions and things like this when their parents were living in the house. And you see a lot of these cases where a lot of people were thrown out of their Section 8 housing because they allowed a felon to be in there. And so from the very beginning, from 2012, since Lorne has been out, he has not been able to live in his mother's house. And the reason why we know she's on Section 8, by the way, it's in his letters to his mother, and also there was several discussions
Yeah, but
made
is that
about that.
definitely still the case though? Because can't that change?
No, absolutely not. No, I don't think there's any political will to change that. But what we can say is that he's no longer in Fort Dix, and he can't, at least under federal guidelines, live with his mother. So the question is, if he went back to the trailer, you would think that would be because it was pre-approved, long-standing pre-approved by probation. You think that would be immediately put up on the registry. So the question is, well, what went wrong? Why didn't
Yeah,
they do
why
that?
isn't it? Yeah.
And so we go into the actual, I think it's Title 9 of the main statutes, where we talk about the entire intent behind it and how it's maintained. And the biggest thing is that it's all about public notice. It's who the person is and where that person is at all times. And it's updated every day. As a matter of fact, Tiffany and I were on this on Saturday, and there's been so many inquiries, I would imagine, on him that they crashed the system. So it was down for a while, but when they came back up, it was still the same. So, and here's the other thing here's the thing that I happen to know. When these prisoners are about to release, they usually have some kind of a plan that's already in place. Usually it's a month before, 2 months before, have a place to live, have an employer. This is all subject to the approval of probation. And you got to remember also, probation was going to stick a bunch of equipment into his house for breathalyzers and things like that. And they would not let him go home without all that stuff being in place.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty clear it's zero tolerance for him at this point. So my guess is there was no place for them to put it. And there was no place for Lorne to go. If the trailer wasn't there, it's certainly, I believe, based on the statutes and the legislative intent and everything behind it, the public deserves to know he is there.
So
And
let's just say that the trailer, for whatever reason, he wasn't able to go back there. His family wouldn't let him stay there, or it wasn't, for whatever reason, he couldn't go back there. Then he'd have nowhere to live, literally nowhere to live, would he?
And they just can't release him in the wild like that.
So let's just say, release him into the wild. So let's just say that he had nowhere to live, right? Would the authorities have to house him?
Yes.
So,
yes, and again, Tiffany brought this up, but Rhoda did too. Rhoda's Chew Tootsie, talking about possibly some kind of halfway house, possibly, and that would be under probably the auspices of the county or the state itself. And And again, if we're talking about mental health issues, or if we're talking about alcohol-related issues, and he's done his time, this might kind of fall into the HIPAA issues, medical issues. Now that stuff is not, that stuff is private. We're not allowed to know all that stuff, so we might not know any of that. The other thing is there could be a possibility that something happened in prison that required some kind of medical psychiatric intervention. Who knows? Who knows? Again, these are all guesses.
Yeah, this is what kind of makes it interesting, because I wasn't too keen on doing this particular stream because I was like, well, we don't have any hard facts. But then I thought, well, actually, like I said earlier, it is an important point in the chapter, and it is kind of fun to speculate a little bit as long as we know it's speculation.
And the third fact, another fact, excuse me, I didn't mean to jump. You just raised that up. The other issue is that he hasn't contacted any of the catfish. Now, there could be reasons for that, but one very good reason could be he has no access. He has no ability to call. He has no ability to get his phone, get his contact list, or anything like that. So again, we're just adding up the evidence, and then we'll try to fit it into some kind of a theory. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's an infinite amount of possible, well, not an infinite, but if you think about the prison situation, something could have dawned on him in prison. He could have had it. I don't know why I'm saying this, but there could have been something that happened to him. He could have been ill. It could be in a medical facility. He could. They could have been trying to get him to do classes, the sex offender classes they could have in-house in the jail. They could have failed dramatically, and they've decided to send him to some kind of a unit. Do you think that's a possibility?
Yeah. Like I said, if anything were to be done to him at this point, since he's done his time, it would have to be under some kind of a civil commitment if it's medical. If they have to hold him for some psychiatric or mental problem or whatever he's having, then it turns mental. It's no longer a penal situation. So that's a little different. He's done his time, but I just have a feeling he had nowhere to go. I just have that feeling. And as I said, probation wasn't going to let him go under those circumstances.
It's interesting. You're not really starting to sort of pique my interest at the minute is what was his state of mind in prison. It's like, was he, because we know that last time when he was inside, he was fueled by his anger and rage of injustice towards NBC. It was all their fault. That kind of gave him the motivation to see it through, because even when he got out and he first got in contact with the community, etc., he was like, yeah, I need to tell people my story. This is my thing. They've done this. He was like, think about the difference now. He's in prison for the second time. He's got very few people to blame it on. He can't blame NBC this time. Reality might have set in. I know this sounds ridiculous, but it's possible. It's possible. Maybe.
Well, yeah. Well, I think this 6 months that he did is probably the hardest stretch that he was harder than any time.
Exactly. That's what I mean. Years. If anything was going to snap him out of it could have been. But you also consider
he lost his support. His financial, his sending guitar books, getting protection money for his Nazi cellmate, all this other stuff. It must have been hard for him to have no support from the outside, never be able to go, have no money for the canteen. That must have been a really tough stretch for him.
And he's not a young man anymore either. That's going to have an effect on him. Last time he had, I wouldn't say he was young, but he had time. Time's running out for him now, Lorne, and this it starts to happen to you when you get older and you're no longer in your 20s and your 30s, and you start to look at life very differently, and you think, shit, I don't have the time and the resources that I used to have, and something sets in on you and it changes the way you look at the world and the way you look at yourself. And obviously what I'm doing at the minute is I'm applying normal reasoning and normal human tendencies to Lorne, which is probably a fatal error. Tiffany, can I just bring you into it, right? What do
Yeah.
you believe his state of mind will have been in? Because his stint in prison this time is a little bit different. The circumstances are different. His life is different. Where do you think his head will have been at?
I think his head will be in the same place that it's always been. That he is the victim of circumstance and of other people. So he's just going to look around and he's going to come up with reasons that are just as ridiculous as him saying that he couldn't turn around because of the median, and that's how he ended up at the Sting House. Or the fact that he went after Rhoda and was sexting her and sending dick pics and having phone sex because he wanted to keep her away from drugs. There's always going to be some kind of a justification that he has that takes the responsibility off of himself and really puts him in a position of where he didn't have any other choice. So he's going to look at this and he's going to say, you know, drinking has nothing to do with the charge that I had. It's bullshit.
Yeah.
Maria and Bryce have been after me. He even said that he had a conversation with his attorney, and his attorney allegedly said that, yeah, I've worked with Bryce before, and he does have it out for people, which I don't think is true. I don't think that really happened.
That was really the wrong thing to set alarm, wasn't it?
Absolutely, but I don't think that it was said. You know, I don't say that that's actually the truth, but that's what Lorne, for whatever reason, he constructed that idea in his mind.
And
so I think.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say that whatever his reasonings are that he thinks that he's there, it's not going to be his fault.
Right, and whatever he's stewing about, I think his biggest problem is he doesn't have anybody who wants to listen to it anymore, unless he wants to talk to a cellmate about it, which I wouldn't think is a good idea. But you know, I don't think he's getting those comforting letters from his mother or the people, whoever was supporting him before. This is a totally different time around for him. Mm-hmm. He is alone. So he's alone with whatever is bothering him and whatever, you know, whatever was cooking up in his mind. He had really no one to share with. And he didn't have Mike Patterson this time.
So, Tiffany, that was quite a damning assessment, if not totally accurate, of course.
I agree.
Nobody can really disagree with what you said, but do you not believe that there is even a slight chance that the circumstances this time have maybe knocked some sense into him?
Well, there's always going to be a chance. There's always going to be one, even if it's a really tiny one. I don't see it happening personally, because you're talking about a guy who has been in sex offender treatment for years. And he still hasn't figured out that all he has to do is answer the questions the way that they want him to, and he would be out of there. So when he's given a very simple question in his treatment book, and he'll go on and on about how I already finished the book the first time, and they didn't let me out of the class because I wasn't in a face-to-face relationship, all of that kind of stuff. When you read his answers, they're non-answers. It doesn't address anything about what they're looking for. And that's why he's still in the class. So for him to go through years of that type of a treatment and not even acknowledge that he's exactly like everyone in the class, he is a sexual predator and he's an offender and he needs to deal with that, he's never going to be able to grow from there. So he is absolutely in the same spot that he's been. There's no change.
Yeah. Of course, I mean, you're exactly right. We and it's great that you pointed that out. I think there is another possibility, which is someone just mentioned in the chat. I think it might have been Connor, that he's had a psychological breakdown. Because even the thing is, these barriers that he puts up to protect himself, they're very flimsy. Any human can only keep that up for so long, because Lorne's not completely fucking stupid. And someone mentioned it in the last stream that we did and said, there is a degree of intelligence there, he just cannot ever make the right decision. He's got such poor judgment, it's just untrue. Let's just say for a minute that all these crazy, even when you were talking to him that time in the I'm Predator calls, you thought initially when you listened to it that he was finally starting to get it. But you realised at the end that he just didn't. He was just saying what you wanted to hear. You couldn't have done it better, by the way, but he was just telling you what you wanted to hear, and it didn't really sink in because he didn't want it to. If reality, even a drip of reality, creeped into Lorne's brain and he started to realise what he is and what he's done with his life and how it's all his fault, he could quite possibly have a psychological breakdown. I've said this for many years. He could, because it's all defence mechanisms that he's put in place. It's quite remarkable, really, to the extremes that he'd go to. You've got to realise the reason we're so interested in Lorne is because he's not just another sex offender. He's out there, man. This guy is away with the furries. You know, he's ridiculous on every level. It's like you say, he's fascinating, and we can't quite put a finger on it. If some reality had set in, I think he could go insane and have crazy breakdown.
He could go insane, not necessarily with the truth of the reality. He could go insane with his delusion.
Well, he's already insane from that perspective.
Well, I meant the angst and frustration or whatever he would have from not being able to tell a sympathetic ear. Now he's on his, that could, without having a place to vent or anything like that, and he's deep into his delusion, he can go insane that way too, I think.
Could do, but he'd probably just do what he did in prison and write it all down and write his journals, because you got to remember, like Tiffany said before, he's a resourceful guy. So what did he do in prison the first time? He wrote a book. He wrote his journals. He went to the gym. He had all these outlets to get out of his system what he needed to. If those had have been taken away from him for whatever reason, let's just say he couldn't find the motivation to write his journals anymore, I'm pretty sure he didn't write a book. You're right, it could be very detrimental to his mental health. He could be depressed. I've often wondered about Lorne and why he isn't depressed, and I have bouts of depression sometimes, and especially like years ago, and I think to myself, if I was in Lorne's position, as horrible as this sounds, I'd be in a dangerous place, really dangerous. I don't think I'd be able to cope living and knowing that I am like him. And it always wonders me I've always wondered why isn't he depressed? And it takes a certain type of person to be depressed, is where you're kind of introverted, where you think about things in a deep way. He doesn't do that because his psyche won't allow him. So if that's changed, he could really be mentally, really suffering from severe depression. I think that's a possibility.
Well, he did go through a depression when he was in prison the first time.
Well, he said he did, didn't he?
Well, it did also say that he went to a special unit as well.
Yeah, he made up some kind of weird diagnostic abbreviation for it, something like EDD or something.
Yeah,
he did.
Stress disorder or something, which is a term.
I think it was just an excuse of him to try and... I think it was just a ploy by him to try and get out of main prison life. I'm just speculating here because he may have been depressed. But I remember from reading the prison documents, I didn't believe he was. I thought it was just some kind of ploy. That was my impression.
Yeah. I can't imagine that this time must have been easy for him. And also compare that to what he was confronted with as opposed to his mood going in. His mood going in, and then suddenly, boom, and it's almost like, oh, Kayla, you're beautiful. And then suddenly Chris Hansen comes in. It's that kind of crash. It's that kind of a dichotomy that just hits him actually a lot. He gets his hopes up and makes his plans, and then suddenly the rug's pulled out from under him.
And the court situation was different as well. He got called, I'm sure that there was other things said of his original trial, but he got called a predator by the judge. He broke down in tears. He completely lost the plot during that rant. As hilarious as it was, he's going to have been thinking about that. Oh, I've said this and I've said that. And when the thing that made it so funny to me when he mentioned his cooking show, the reason that I just burst out into hysterics like I did, is because it highlighted to me just how out of touch he is with what's going on around him. How he really doesn't get it. How he doesn't he just doesn't have a grip on reality the way that we do, or the way that most people do. For him to come out with that in that situation was ridiculous. And so all that's going to be going through his mind. And then I don't know whether this has had a bearing. He sees us at the back. He doesn't know who we are. His brain is going to have been going 100 different ways, and I think it's quite comical, Shin, because I've said before, you have the look of like an Italian gangster. So if he sees you, his mind is going to be going in a million different directions. He might be thinking that you're the guy that's orchestrated the whole thing to get him stitched up. You know what I mean?
Oh, sorry to hear that. You raise a good issue, Andy. We actually, when we were observing him, first of all, he didn't strike me as, aside from his little, histrionic speech that he gave, he seemed like he was in a decent mood.
Yeah.
He didn't seem like he wasn't crying or wailing and they'd have to carry him out of there or anything like that. He seemed fine and almost cocky to me when it was over, thinking, okay, I got 6 months, fuck you all. That's what it looked like to me. But just going back and looking at his lawyer, Tom Morgan, who did a great job. I think, I hate to say it, but in the future, if Lorne is confronted with another legal proceeding, any lawyer who's going to, and I'm thinking Morgan might have considered this, who's going to represent him, at any criminal hearing, is going to have to argue his competency to stand trial. I truly believe, based on all of this, if you add it all up, I don't believe that he understands he understood the nature of the proceedings. I think he understood generally. I think he knew that he was going to go to jail, but I don't think he understood what it took to help him out, which goes to the second stage. Is he couldn't assist his defense attorney with his defense. As a matter of fact, he was a big obstacle to try to help him. Those are two things you would present to the court and get them evaluated. And it may very well be they understand that. Who knows?
Psychologist just put in the chat, that really made me chuckle. Fort Dix, Judge Woodcock, Mr. Penis, his adult life has been destroyed by male genitalia.
Oh my God. Didn't look at it that way. Somebody else said something. There's another possibility, and I hate to say it, as macabre as it is, he could be dead. You never know. I mean, this could be a reason. I don't think so.
No, I don't think that's it.
I think he would be eliminated off the RSO. And somebody else said, well, he could be living with a family member. Now, again, I consider that possibility, and I'm just looking at the statute requiring the state to notify the public as to where he is at all times, and I don't see any exceptions. I don't see that, and it has to be updated. I mean, they talk about it, how important real time is. For people, to have notification to keep the community safe, which is the legislative intent behind the whole thing. And if he was living at a relative's house, I don't think there would be any exception that they would not put that address on his RSO.
Something as well, why we're talking about his sort of mental state and depression and whatnot. This is going to be the first time in a long, long time that he's not been able to drink virtually every night. We know why he drinks. He's even said it. He even said it back in the chat when he was talking to Kayla, that he used to drink to escape, and as many people do. So he'll have gone 6 months now without a drop. And those moments in jail will have had an effect on him. I'm really starting to go down this road of this mental health thing now. I'm not necessarily the depression, but I think he potentially could be quite ill psychologically. I think he kind of is anyway, really, but he's able to function. But to the point where I'm not too sure if he'll actually be able to function anymore.
Well, I think he's on his way to civil commitment, and in this case, it doesn't look like the feds initiated anything.
So do you just want to explain what that means? Because I'm not civil.
Civil commitment is essentially where somebody's too much of a danger to let go, even though they serve their sentence. You see that a lot with sex offender cases. Right. A lot of pedophiles are held indefinitely.
Where would he be held if that was the case?
Mental hospital.
Right.
Down here we have actually a hospital that's segregated in Bridgewater. It's for the criminally insane. He'd be in something like that. They keep him away from potential innocent people. You know, it would be a very, very secure facility.
No, it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, and the other rumor about his family moving for a guardianship or conservatorship, as much as that's not substantiated, it makes a whole bunch of sense.
Why is that then?
Well, you're typically, when you have those situations, you're dealing with somebody who cannot handle any of their affairs. We're talking about medical decisions, financial decisions. I think we have plenty of evidence to prove he cannot handle money, his own money. As a matter of fact, he takes money from other people. He's a spendthrift. There's no question about it. That's typically when they come in and get a guardianship, where essentially it's a massive power of attorney. They make all the decisions for him, where he's going to live, his medical treatment, everything.
My argument against this was that no one cared in his family. The only person that did was his mother.
Well, it's not so much they would do it. I don't think, again, this is just guessing. I don't think it would be out of care. I think it would be out of nuisance. You know, I think it would be out of, this guy's bringing us all down.
So you believe there's a possibility that Lorne's siblings have kind of seen what he's been doing to his mother and done this to keep him away and keep him from draining and bleeding her dry, basically?
Yeah. Stephanie, you mentioned that his aunt.
Stephanie?
Oh, excuse me, Tiffany. Sorry. I keep doing that. Tiffany, you mentioned that his aunt Sharon kind of may be the only person that has sympathy for him.
Well, as far as when he's mentioned her, you know, he talks about her with a lot of affection, you know, about how nice she is and how sweet she is. And I think that just like with his mom, she sort of looks at Lorne in a sympathetic way.
Yeah.
So I really do think that, you know, the number of people that truly have Lorne's back it's a very, very small number. Yeah. And it's going to be limited to, and even with his mom, I mean, you know, you guys saw her. She showed up in court. She's the only one there.
Sharon was there.
Right. Sharon was there, but she was the only one. I don't think Sharon was in the courtroom though.
No. She was outside the courtroom, but she had her letter read, which I found very interesting.
Right. You know, I think his mom as well, just even, you know, that's her son, of course, she's going to love him. But she has to, at 80 years old, she's having to parent this 50-year-old man. And not only that, but she has Roy to contend with as well. That's just as bad.
So it would be more along, if they moved for something like this, it wouldn't necessarily be for his benefit, but for his mother's.
Well, yeah. And then, you know, you have society's benefit as well. I mean, Connor had mentioned earlier, and theories been thrown around for a long time, is that, you know, Lorne really thrives in incarceration. That's where he can function the best, because when he is left to his own devices, he's not able to make the right decisions. And ultimately, it comes down to he has absolutely no impulse control. He can know that something is dangerous for him to do. He knows that it's not the right thing to do to get into his car and drive home. But that's not his concern. Mm-hmm. His concern with everything that he does is, how am I going to get away with it?
Bingo.
That's it. Mm-hmm. So when he's in prison, he doesn't have that option. The only way that he is not going to drive drunk, the only way that he is not going to be abusive to people, the only way he's not going to continue to steal from people, is if he doesn't have the option to do that.
Yeah. Leaving him to his own devices, you're right, is a train wreck.
Yeah, you're right. He's absolutely not able to do anything on his own.
What you were saying, Shin, about it being decided that he's, not able to make these decisions and whatnot because he doesn't really understand what's going on. He never really has he? He's never really had a full grasp of anything.
I also say I have personal experience. I was appointed when I was in law school. Somebody came in from social services looking for guardians for all these people who needed them, and I was guardian for several people, and I made every decision where they lived, everything. I mean, here, it's this 22-year-old kid making a decision about some 55-year-old guy, and it's very, very restrictive. And once they're able to prove their case, but the other thing is, I kind of want to leave this, possibly talk about one of the theories resulting in something that is near and dear to all of our hearts, and that is the dogs. I believe, again, if the theory that I'm going with is he's homeless, and possibly he had some medical issues, maybe, who knows? But either way, I think that the registry would certainly update it, and at least the federal registry would, for sure. But I believe that if he was not able to go back to his dogs and he doesn't have a place to go, I think his dogs probably got rehomed. Anybody's better than Lorne, as far as I'm concerned, even a shelter, because they're all no-kill up in Maine. And that now he's not in a position to ever get them back because he has nowhere to take them to. So I think that to me really lifts my heart. It really does. To know those dogs.
I believe that people in his family care more for the dogs than they do for him, and I believe the dogs have been looked after by them because his mum mentioned the dogs in the speech that she was told to say, so she's aware of it. Her sister will be aware of it, and the rest of the family will be aware of it. And if you get a family like that, and not everybody's an arsehole in that family like Lorne, you will always get people that love dogs. Everybody loves dogs. There will be someone that has looked after them. There's no doubt about that in my mind. But of course, we've seen what Lorne does to the dogs, and we know that he's not the, we know that they're better off without him. Put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd rather have Roy take care of them.
Exactly. Yeah,
I love anybody.
Roy gives them ham.
By the way, I think his mother brought that up in her victim witness or her witness statement on his behalf to show two things. Number one, he's got a good heart, and number two, he's got a responsibility you can't take him from. I mean, those are pretty much it. She just said he loves his dog. There's no stories about taking him out for walks or taking him to a dog park or whatever. However you spoil your dogs, but there's nothing like that. And I don't think Mama Gwen has any particular affinity for them. But again, Lorne uses his dogs for many reasons. In this case, he uses them for a pedo prop. And he also uses it as a source of sympathy for the judge. I mean, he doesn't have much, so he's got to get something. He's got to throw something out there.
Yeah, there's no genuine sort of reason there. It's all him trying to get something, isn't it? There's never a decision he makes which is just based on kindness or. It's quite remarkable. He's always got to get something out of everything, hasn't he? He's so selfish. It's fucking unbelievable.
Yeah. So I think people say, well, he can get his dogs back. He'll get more dogs. If he's in fact homeless, I doubt very much he's going to be able to work his way out of that. Do you? I mean, I don't know how he's not going to be a continual ward for the state. I don't know how he's going to get a job to get out of there, or a place to live, or anything like that.
Isn't he legally obliged to get work?
Yes, he has.
Isn't there some kind of thing in place where he has to get a job? Someone has to employ him.
A little bit of time for that once he gets back. But the first thing that he needs to do is get an approved residence to go to. And again, it's my guess that the RSO, once they know what this is, they would immediately change it on the day of his release. And it's been what, 4 days now? So, I don't know why they're holding up, warning the public of a potential danger in their community. It makes no sense.
I was just thinking as well. The hearing that Mama Gwen was at, and actually, I think that she was at both hearings, the detention and also the revocation. I think that hearing the stuff from the probation officer and also from the judge, as long as she could hear it, of course, I think that would have been eye-opening as well.
Yes,
because she's not going to be aware of any of the circumstances surrounding Lorne's behavior. Certainly when it comes to probation and things like that, that are outside of what Lorne tells her. And everything that he's going to say is going to be total bullshit.
Yeah.
So I think that could have been eye-opening as well. They said some really great things in those hearings that really pinpointed the fact that he is not following any of the requirements that they set out for him, and that he has also been caught multiple times in an attempt to not have them find out what he's doing. And so having Maria talk and having the judge talk and the lawyers really spelling out, like, here's the truth, here are the facts, and they're pretty damning.
Yeah.
So when Lorne,
detention hearing, do you obviously it's not in the transcript.
I believe that she was at the detention hearing,
because that's where Maria really unloaded.
Yeah, I believe that she was, because I think the judge may have mentioned something about his mother, who's here today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because the one we went to, they got rid of that count and they just talked about his alcoholism. So, but that first reading that transcript, that was pretty eye-opening.
Yeah. Yeah, the first one is
for anybody who
pretty
believes
great.
their own son,
I mean, it's great because, especially when you think about, with Maria talking about, talking to these people, and he doesn't know how old they are. She knows that everyone that he speaks to is bullshit. She knows that. She hates it. She hates it when he brings it up. She's just like, shut the fuck up. Winnie, that bitch, or
made
whoever.
It so funny, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
When I first heard, it was in the really long Ramona call, and the first time I ever heard it, it was amazing because it contained within it a phone call that Lorne had with Mother Gwen, and it was it was like it was scripted. It was so funny, and it highlighted so much. I think you can see it on YouTube now. It's called Lorne is yelled at by Mother Gwen. And I think it calls about 10 minutes. And within that 10 minutes, you can figure out that Lorne steals a car, is abusive towards her, he doesn't spend any time with her, he's stupider than his mother, he does not have any respect for her, he uses her to try and get one over on his siblings. It's like there was so much highlighted within that 10-minute call.
His siblings alienated him. That's another one.
Yeah, it was so. That's what I mean when I said it was like it was scripted. I remember listening to that and thinking, "Thank you, God, for this bounty I have received." It was just amazing to listen to, and like it told you everything that you needed to know about, because you got to remember at that point when that Ramona stuff came out for the first time, we didn't really know that side of him. We'd only heard from the phone, the phone calls and the chat log. So to hear that, I mean, we'd heard him talking to people on YouTube, but that was when he didn't think anyone was listening. So that was what we first got to hear, the real Lorne, and his relationship with his mother is a fascinating. It's disturbing. But it's fascinating because he's someone who professes to love her so much and defends her honour at every opportunity. And I think there is a small part of him that has this affection for his mother. I don't think Lorne is 100% completely evil. There is, I think, there's a little glimmer of some kind of affection that he has for her. But
I have an argument against that.
What's
that? Done. I said I have an argument against that when you're done.
Well, no, please continue. Go on.
Well,
I thought that you would. It's quite funny. You probably hate Lorne more than anybody ever.
Lorne will never do anything right in my eyes, but
we need someone to say that. So how do you? So you don't think there's even one little bit of him that likes his mum?
I think that he does because she does things for him. Mm-hmm. That's the only reason why. Mm-hmm. He's pointed out. There was at one point in a call that was a long time ago, where I was telling him basically about himself. Like, look at what a mess you make all the time. Tell me about some good decisions that you've made. And he'll talk about how I help Aunt Sharon because Aunt Sharon has done things for me. I help Mom because she's done things for me. I help Uncle Clay because he's done things for me. There's nothing in there that says I help out the community somehow, or I help out a family member because they're my family member. The reason, and I know we don't know a lot about Lorne's father, and everything we do know is pretty terrible, but he doesn't have any affection for his dad. And I don't think that it's strictly because of his dad's character or how he was abusive to his mom or to the other kids. I think that some of it has to do with Lorne's dad never did anything for him.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, yeah, exactly. If you're doing something for him, then he has use for you. And if it's your mother that's doing something for him, then he's going to exaggerate his love for her and be extremely defensive if anybody brings anything up and everything else. But it makes you wonder how would he talk about her if she didn't give him any money, if she didn't give him any resources, if she wasn't able to get all that stuff. My guess is he probably would act the same way, only to keep the image up. But I don't think it would. I don't think he would feel that way as impulsively as he does now. As he just says it without even thinking. But it would have been really funny if Mama Gwen at the sentencing hearing talked about they don't think he's honorable, something like that. It was just the truth on this thing. But she's had to deal with his bullshit. I mean, she knows, like you said, Tiffany, she knows this stuff has been bullshit and lies, and you could only imagine how stupid she thinks her son is, and it's almost like a Gran Amato kind of thing going on, where I think that they realize he was just at a point of no return. He's never coming back. He's so deluded right now. And he'll never accept responsibility, and he's always going to leech off of us. So I don't know. But I do think he has affection for his mother, but it's not as great as it is. And it's enhanced by her giving him things. But if that ever ended, he would still use that as an image. I think that. Just like dogs. Look at me. I'm such a great animal lover. I'm starving my dogs. I'm letting them deal with ear mites on their own,
Right.
But yeah, everything for him is how he looks, not just his image, but his image to women. That's what he's concerned about. Everything is how he looks.
Oh, another blow for Lorne. He's got no allies on this panel, has he?
Well, we're all kind of guilty of that to a certain extent, to a much lesser degree, I guess, but not that drastic. That's for sure.
Yeah. Have we gone over any other possibilities of where he is? So we've got potentially some kind of psychological episode. He's been incarcerated in some kind of facility because he's still a danger. There could have been some kind of other treatment within the jail, or some kind of program that he's done which has gone wrong, which has highlighted maybe just how much of a danger he is. I mean, you've got to remember it's been brought up quite a bit, but this is a guy that's done sex offender class. I love that, mate. Rape class. Oh, it's the comedy potential within that is just fucking unbelievable.
Well, you got rape
just
class
the
and
rape
rage
class today, dear.
Rage class, by the way, we used to call it rage class. That's anger management class. So you got rape class and rage class.
It's just, and he's in both of them, but he's like, there's a lot that could have happened to him when he's inside that could have had a bearing on where he is now. Like I said, some kind of mental health episode, could have even been physical. What happens a lot is when you suppress a lot of your emotions and whatnot, it can manifest in a physical way. Maybe he's ill. He's got nowhere to live. I mean, is it? I was going to say he's offended again in prison, but he'd still be inside, wouldn't he? And we'd know if he was inside, wouldn't we?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you think about it, also the psychological episodes that he may have had in prison, where his support system was, I don't want to say stripped completely away, but probably reduced drastically. And my guess is he probably tried to share with some other inmates that didn't really give him the feedback that he wanted and made things worse, or maybe reacted in kind of an aggressive, violent way or something too. You never know. But I think his biggest issue on this time in prison is just having no support. And that would drive anybody crazy, especially somebody who lives on delusions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the more and more that we've sort of talked about this now, I think it's some kind of problem with him, rather than a logistics issue or something like that. I think something's happened. This is like I said, this is just speculation.
Rhoda just brought up a possibility. Maybe he got picked up on another charge. If he did, Rhoda, it wouldn't be in the. At least we checked the Pacer system. There's nothing there. There's no new. I don't think there's any new docket representing a new case or anything like that. But I don't know for sure.
I didn't see anything.
Maybe there's a state charge that we're not aware of. We should maybe check that. But again, the facts are, I don't think he has a place to go, and he was released. That we do know. So where it goes from there, and this rumor or unsubstantiated information that somebody had given about his family initiating guardianship proceedings, as much as that makes a lot of sense, and I think eventually it'll go that route, and especially if he's back in court again and he gets a decent lawyer who will realize that this guy's incompetent, I think he'll eventually be on his way to civil commitment, whether it's initiated by the courts or by his family. So, does anybody have any other questions here? Let's see. Lorne will pop up in a couple of weeks. That would be great. Could have got teleported.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's pretty much
There
it.
would have to be something that would be filed, right? Even if we can't see it, even if it was sealed, it would still show a record of something being filed there.
You would think.
Yeah.
I'm going to check the state system anyway. Somebody said earlier in the chat that they were checking into something. They may have found something. I don't know who that was. I think they were looking into halfway houses. But if you guys find anything like that, throw that in the comments. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay. Andy, you asleep?
I'm just reading the comments, dude. No, I'm not asleep. Although it is getting pretty late.
I know you.
So, I mean, what would happen? What are we going to do? Because we need to know. What's going to happen if we haven't heard anything in a week? Is there anything that we can do to try and find out any, other than go down the same avenues that we have?
It's pretty much going to be the same avenues. We would have to see something updated on the website, or to see some kind of documents filed somewhere for a case.
Yeah, I think I'll check out the state courts up there in that
Mhm.
county, Somerset. I think it's Somerset, and see if there's any entries for him. I'll even check the civil cases too. Uh, there could be a caption for him, but any of the filings would probably be sealed. But at least if we see some activity going on in a state court, we have a little bit more.
Yeah. That, I think that's really the only thing that is going to say anything, unless Lorne were to reach out himself, something like that.
Don't check Pacer, check Variety Kilometer. There's a chance that he, like I said, he could be homeless. They can't release him. They're waiting for a halfway bed to open up because that's how it works. And sometimes you have to have a client cooling his heels for a while for a bed to open up somewhere.
Breaking news, guys. I've got Lorne on the line now, and he's going to actually tell us. Lorne, can you tell us where you've been for the last 6 months?
No.
Sorry.
Oh my God. What?
But he could be like loosely held in jail, waiting for a halfway house to open up. Who knows?
So these halfway houses, are they ones where? Because in England you can kind of very easily break out of them, but are these secure facilities?
No.
No, but they have curfews, things like that require people to be back at a certain time. If they violate them, they can get violated back. But the halfway house wasn't part of his disposition on this case. So it's not like if he violates any rules in a halfway house, he can go back to prison. Typically, they shave off time off his prison sentence to send him to a halfway house. He's done. So it has to be from a civil standpoint, I would imagine. And again, probation's not going to let him go. Just set him loose like that.
There is one possibility that's been mentioned in the chat. Sorry, is that Stallone has took him in.
I mean,
well, you have to consider the source of that as well, and if it's clobbering time, then we're going to need to see.
Well, I don't know. There's a few people. There's a few people in the chat that are saying the same thing, and don't forget, Stallone's a big fan, so anything's possible. That guy's got resources. You know what I mean?
Matthew Leclerc, you're absolutely right. This could be just a bureaucratic slowdown. They're not getting it together fast enough. But our discussion before was going over the actual statute itself, how important that it be updated as soon as possible. So as soon as new information is discovered. But you're right. That's always a possibility that he could be back at the trailer. They just haven't updated it yet.
That would be a complete failing of the system.
That'd be negligent, I think. It's more than just bureaucracy at that point.
And especially at this point.
Yeah.
And the fact that probably on the federal system, I don't know if it's just going to mirror what it says on the state, or if it's going to have some additional information. They happen to be housed somewhere else, like when he was in New Jersey, but it doesn't say New Jersey now, and I don't know if it ever did.
No, I don't think it did. It may have been. We never checked the national before. It may have said it there. But Maine would only be concerned about where he would live in Maine.
Right. So, in considering that the federal system is showing that he's in Maine.
Right. Well,
it would seem like.
Did anybody check it while he was incarcerated, what the federal system said? If it said he was
I'm sure they did, but I don't remember.
Yeah. ACT.
I want to say that it probably did, though, because how would anybody know that that's exactly where he was?
Yeah, I would think so too.
Unless he said that's where I'm going, but I don't know. I kind of feel like it was said somewhere.
Actually, Scotty,
you see what Tom just said. Check out Google Earth satellite feeds. You'll be able to see him on that.
I think the Maine registry did change. If you look at the federal registry, it has the jail address, and I think the jail address was initially on the Maine RSO, if I remember correctly. So it changed only in the sense that it eliminated some information on it, but it was the same place.
Well, you know what's weird? I don't know if this means anything at all, but when you go onto the federal site, it'll say that Piscataquis County Jail on the listing for Lorne. But when you click on his name to get more information, that's when it'll say the Dover Foxcroft, and it says nothing about the jail.
Yeah.
And it looks like actually this is the same information that's on the main registry.
Yeah. Well, you could have a same situation as Thomas Coffin and those guys who were homeless when they got out. You have to find a place to live under a bridge, which is really interesting. There was a Florida documentary about that, where basically sex offenders can't really live anywhere, given all the state and municipal regulations on top of it. So they all live under a bridge, and they actually have that as an address on their license. So they have to let us know where he is somewhere.
I've got a feeling we're going to find out in the next in the near future. I don't think this is going to be the end of the Lorne saga, but it is kind of like I'm kind of enjoying the mystery of not knowing. Like it's kind of like it used to be when we were like trying to figure out what was going on in that brain, and obviously, you know, some of the new content is really good, and it's nice to hear him ranting and raving and whatnot. But there is that kind of mystery that's kind of nice. You know, I used to imagine him sat there stewing at the Church of Cod. Like, of course, that's a bit all a bit different now. But it's like I've said, he's going to have been wondering who we were at the back of the courtroom, and it's not like an egotistical thing. It's more of a he's gonna want to know who these guys were at his court hearing. Are we all out to get him? Has it made him go mad? It's all very interesting. You know, has his family finally fucked him off? Has he gone insane? Has he finally had a moment of realization? It's all quite intriguing, really. It's it's kind of an interesting chapter in this Lorne story that we're all fucking very strangely intrigued by. We're all insane, let's be honest. But any final points you guys want to make before we end it?
I don't think so. I think we kind of covered it, at least for me.
Well, he can't run, he can't hide. We'll find out where he is eventually if he's alive.
We will, even if we all have to chip in and pay a private investigator. We're going to find out what's going on.
I was tempted to go up and at least take a look at the trailer, but again, that directive again. I don't know.
Well, it's not really violating the Prime Directive just by looking at his trailer, is it? Unless you kind of fucking ran into him when he was drink driving, of course.
Well, I don't want him running into the woods scared again if he's there. I don't want that to happen.
Yeah, I know what you mean. But won't it be like really cold in Maine now?
Yeah, it's cold right now. Yeah, it's snowing actually.
Right. I bet it's beautiful. I bet it looks amazing when it's snowing there. Wow.
You know, if anybody was inclined to do this, I was thinking that, you know, first of all, we can do a state court search to see if there's any docket with his name on it, and secondly, might be able to check to see if any animals were returned during that operative time from August 7th through February 5th, matching the descriptions and the names of these dogs. That might be something that we, there's no confidential issues there or anything like that we might be able to get some more clues. But I think if we just wait for maybe another week or so, we might know something.
Yeah, something will come to fruition, I believe, at some point. And there's something that we've not even touched upon. We believe that if he was out with his faculties about him, he would have contacted Tiffany or someone else with regard who was involved in the catfishing. There's no doubt, because he's got nothing else going on in his life. He knows it's all bullshit. He knows he's being taken for a fool. But just like the Ramona situation, even after he found out that she'd been lying to him for fucking a year, and in the most humiliating of circumstances, I'm putting it all online, he still asked the question, "You really love me, don't you?" And that just just highlights the sad desperation that this man has. It's quite disturbing and sad, and if it was anybody other than him, you'd actually feel sorry for him. It's remarkable. But anyway, guys in the chat, thank you so much for joining us, everybody. It's been we've had quite a lot of people in today. I think we're all intrigued as to what's going on. It's we're all in the same boat. We've all got this bizarre fascination in common that we can't quite put our fingers on, and it's really good that we can all get together like this. So I want to thank my usual regular experts in Lornography, Mr. Shins Koala and Miss Tiffany Lockhart. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm honoured and blessed to have you with me every other week or whenever we do it.
Thank you.
Cool.
So, guys in the chat, thank you so much. We will be back. We are planning. We've got some great ideas for some streams coming up soon. But obviously, this takes precedence this week because of what's going on or what we're trying to figure out is going on. So depending on what the situation is this time next week, we will have another one. So guys, again, thank you very much, and we'll speak to you soon.